Shall we play a game?
Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky all up in your podcast. It's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks for pressing play. Yes, it's been a while, but here we go. Another slice of amazing geeky goodness from yours truly. Don't worry, the podcast is still going. It might come out twice in 1 month, and then 3 months later, or once a month for a year in a row. I don't know, but it's always going to be there. So hang in there, and you'll always get another episode from me to you. Because there's one thing I love to do is flap my lips, and I haven't been able to flap my lips at the microphone anywhere near as much as I have wanted to so far in 2025. So this episode is going to be just a hodgepodge of things. I do have guests and topics lined up that won't be like this, but it's been a while since I just did a general news, geeky interest, follow my nose kind of podcast episode. So that's going to be what this one is. And I really enjoy doing these. You know, I think people prefer listening to episodes that are around a central topic. So if this is the first time you're listening, then this is not always the format. So anyway, a few show notes, housekeeping notes, whatever, before we get going. The last episode of Shane Plays, if you missed that, was episode 281, which was Banquet for Fools. I do like, is it Banksy, that graffiti artist? He's amazing. Anyway, Banquet for Fools with Hannah and Joseph Williams, which is, they're an amazing husband and wife video game design team. They made like a cool action RPG that's sort of inspired by Dark Crystal aesthetic. So if you missed that, you might want to go check it out. You can find it, wherever you got this podcast. We're on, you can always get the podcast at the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, YouTube, and more. I always throw it out on YouTube, just audio only. I do have a Patreon. Just look for Shane Plays Geek Talk, or go to the website. I think it's linked there. I have an X account under Shane Plays. I have a Threads account. I think it's under Shane Plays, and a Blue Sky account under Shane Plays. So, I'm all over that stuff. I do have a book out there I haven't mentioned in a long time, but I still get royalties off of it. So I guess it's selling still. It's Dungeons and Desktops, which is the history of computer role-playing games, 2nd edition. Matt Barton of Matt Chat fame, who's an amazing, just really cool guy, does really good video game related interviews and other content on his channel at Matt Chat. Anyway, he graciously allowed me to come along and be a co-author on that. If you're into computer role-playing games at all, CRPGs, check that book out. It's Dungeons and Desktops, the history of computer role-playing games, 2nd edition. And I always want to give a shout out to sponsor Cursova Magazine, CIRSOVA Magazine. They're like keeping the torch lit for, think of magazines like, Pulp Fiction kind of magazines, astounding fiction, amazing science fiction, those kinds of magazines, Swords and Sandals, all that kind of stuff. So check out Cursova. So anyway, moving right along. Okay, to start things off, I'm going to talk a little bit about comic books, which is one of my favorite things. Longtime listeners will know that's a major pillar of discussion of this podcast. I'm probably going to rant a little bit. Scratch that. I'm definitely going to rant a little bit. I try to keep this show positive, so I'm not going to go off into deep recesses of ultimate darkness in my ranting, but I am going to kvetch somewhat, because kvetching about the things we love is part of being a geek. But I've been getting, where I buy my comic books, they give me the DC Connect, which is the thing that, it shows you the stuff that's coming out. So you know what comics to bug your friendly local comic book store to put on your reserve list and that sort of thing. Because things have changed a lot in comic books, which, again, longtime listeners of this podcast will know that that's a soapbox that I like to get on. That used to, comic books found you. This isn't my main rant, by the way, but comic books found you. You went to the gas station or convenience store. These days, I guess it would be in a lot of places a bodega. Well, I'm kind of fascinated by bodegas, actually. I wish our neighborhood had one, but I live in the suburbs. I've always been a suburbanite. So we don't have bodegas, but I digress. Wherever you went, grocery store, anywhere. You know, I remember the BX on the Air Force Base that I lived for several years had comic books. They just found you. They were just everywhere, spinner racks and all that stuff. But now, for the most part, now there's other ways to get comic books, but for the most part, you have to go to your friendly local comic book store. So, and they, because they don't want to over order, because then they get stuck with inventory. It works much better for them if you say, I want these exact comics. Can you order them for me? Instead of just coming in and kind of browsing and getting whatever's on the shelf. Although there's a little bit of that still left too. But it used to, and again, this isn't my rant. This has been a long time before they went to the direct market way of selling most comic books. If you order comic books, then and they didn't sell, in most cases, I think you could rip the cover off and send it back to the publisher, and then you didn't have to pay for that. Well, that's no longer the case. Whatever the retailer orders is theirs, and whatever they don't sell, for the most part, there may be a few exceptions here, but for the most part, they're stuck with the inventory. So it's they're really keen on not ordering too much. This is also where all this variant cover stuff comes in. A big push for the variant covers, which I'm just going to say, and again, this isn't my main rant. I like variant covers only for the fact that they give artists more opportunity to get their work out there to people. Other than that, I hate everything about variant covers. I want to know, anytime I look at a comic, I instantly want to know, oh, that was whatever, Fantastic Four number whatever. I remember reading that comic on this date, and that cover is part of the memory experience for me. And now I'm like, did I buy this? I've literally bought comics before because, more than one, because I made a mistake on the went in 3 weeks later. Did I have this? I don't recognize that cover. It's also, it kind of twists the arm of the retailer. They're like, unless you order X amount of this issue of Amazing X Superman Lantern number 50, unless you order 200 copies, then we're not going to give you any of the variant cover of X, which one of your customers is going to want. So it's kind of a way of strong arming the retailer, the comic book store, into having to order more copies of stuff than they want. So business wise, and as a comic book reader, I hate variant covers. I hate the idea of it. It creates a false demand or false, hey, we sold 800 copies of, Amazing Flash number, seventh Flash in a row, 7th Flash Junior. We sold 500 of those. Well, no, you didn't. You really would have only sold like 32 of them to this comic book store, but you made them order all these extras so that you could get those variant covers. So I don't like that. Now, I understand there's people out there that might like the variant covers and they want every variant cover of every issue, and that's all good for you. I don't like the idea of them. The only thing I like about them is it gives artists opportunity to get their work out there on a comic book cover. Other than that, I don't like them. But anyway, that's not my main rant. So they give me the comic to bring it back. I'm going to bring it back in, Shane. Reel it in, Shane. Just reel it back in. So you get these like DC Connect. Looks like Marvel is free previews. That's the current name of it. And they're basically like, they look like a comic book, but when you flip in them and it's just page after page of essentially 1 or 2 page ads for upcoming comic books. And you know, I don't like these because you get spoiled. Like, oh, I see, because, you know, they're like 4 issues ahead. So you're like, oh, well, I see that in, you know, Absolute Superman number 8, which, by the way, I'm on like Absolute Superman number like 4 or something right now. I see what's coming 8 issues down the line. Right? But it helps the retailer to look through here and tell them what I want. So I hate it. I really don't like how comic books work these days. I like the medium of comic books. I like comic books. I don't like the business model of comic books these days. And I hope we can get back to where we get the prices down. They don't have to be printed on nuclear resistant paper. Most of these comic books I'm going to read one time, maybe 2. They don't have to last 500 years with perfect print and no fading and all that. If people want that level of archive quality, buy the trade paperback when it comes out. You know, buy the collection and put it on your bookshelf. You know, let's get the prices down. Let's get them back in convenience stores and stuff. Anyway, again, that's not my main rant. So my main rant is, as I look through here at these, and this is DC Connect number 59 for June 2025. And over and over and over, all of these write-ups are like, it'll change the DC universe or the Marvel universe or this character forever. And it's like every month, everything's getting changed forever. And when everything's constantly being changed, nothing's being changed. Like, if you never have a status quo that gets time to set in and become the status quo, there's no shock to that status quo getting upset or changed. There's no energy to it. It becomes boring. It becomes humdrum. And it just over and over. When you look through this, you know, you can't go 2 or 3 pages without they're like, major changes. Don't miss this one. Everything changes forever. And it's either the character or a supporting character. Usually it's the entire universe, right? It'll never be the same again. Well, it wasn't the same last month, and it wasn't the same the month before that. And we're not even always talking about major events, you know, the event comics, you know, where they like, hey, let's have an event. And then you have to buy every comic book that the entire the company publishes for 3 months to have any clue of what's going on. I get it. They want to sell comic books. But newsflash, back in the day, they sold a lot of comic books without having to resort to these tricks. So like here, this is a key issue for the future of Superman and Lex Luthor. And that's a very mild example. Usually it's like everything changes forever. You know, if I flip through here long enough, I'll find one. You know, here we go. Read this. It's the significant step toward the next major DCU event and the grand finale of whatever. You know, don't miss this. It's nothing will ever be the same. Everything changes here. Page 16 and 17 of this DC Connect. It's the new history of the DC universe, which actually looks pretty cool with the artwork and everything. These huge montages with all these characters packed in. But if you didn't keep changing everything, you wouldn't have to keep reprinting or coming up with the new history of the universe. When there's no status quo, when you don't let a status quo become the status quo for a while, it doesn't matter when you keep shaking things up. Somewhere, somehow, the marketing people or the editors or something, and it's not just DC, it's not just Marvel. If you look through Marvel's stuff, they're the same thing. You go about, 4 pages in Marvel, talks about the world to come. And it says, you know, it talks about changing comics as we know it. You don't want to miss this landmark project. The future of the Marvel Universe is here. as they show you the world to come, it just nothing can ever. So here's the point. One of the points I'm trying to make. If you did these big event stunts every 2 or 3 years, it might still have some, what's the word, frizzen, excitement, goosebump potential. But as it is, it's just like, oh yeah, well, you just changed everything 6 months ago. And you changed everything 6 months before that. And oh, so-and-so, whoever, man, their book, you just shook them up yesterday. So it's just like, I can't. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I've been reading comics so long, that I'm impossible to please or something. But somewhere in Marvel or DC or somewhere along the line, the editors or the marketing people or the data crunchers figured out that saying changed forever, milestone this, that must sell books, because this stuff is just absolutely riddled with it. Everything is an event. Everything is like, I can't read these days, and it's been a while, in all honesty, since I could do this, but it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. I can't pick it. Let's just throw a character out there that I want to read. Let's say Green Lantern. And these days, you got all these different Green Lantern books and whatever. But let's just say I want to read a Green Lantern Hal Jordan book, a monthly, not a limited. Everything's a limited series these days. That's another thing. Can we not get? I used to average generic nurse lady could get a run of 100 issues. And now we can't do that. Like everything, 8 issues. Wow, what a great arc. Or you can't get a team. You can't get a writer artist team to stay on something for a long time like they used to and really make it their own. But anyway, I'm not going to digress any further on that. I can't, let's say, I wanted to read Iron Man or Green Lantern or Hulk or whoever. I can't go a whole year and just read their story without an event intruding into it or them crossing over with something else or them getting shaken up. There is no status quo. There is no just let me read so-and-so's book and enjoy their story. They're always getting pulled, or I'm reading, let's just say Spider-Man. I'm reading Spider-Man. Oh, that was a good issue. And it says, jump over to, Amazing X-Butt number 47, and then come back here. No, I don't want to do that. I want to read dude's stuff in his book without being interrupted. Like the Justice League Unlimited just launched, and they're already having a crossover with Batman, Superman, World's Finest. I don't want to do that. Let me read the book that I want to read. But back to my greater thing, a few years ago, they did the New 52, which is one of my least favorite relaunches of any comic universe out there. I'm sure it had some good stuff in it, and it wasn't all bad. But overall, I really didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy the tone. I didn't enjoy a lot of stuff they did. But when they were getting ready for Rebirth, which they're trying to play it both ways. It wasn't a relaunch, but it was, right? They're doing a lot of that stuff now. So they killed that Superman, and hardly anybody noticed. Think about that for a second. They took one of the most iconic, and that's another rant. People overuse iconic. I see iconic in every headline on the internet these days because somebody figured out that iconic gets people's attention, but they're using it wrong. Iconic means it represents something else. When you see something that's iconic, it makes you think of something else. When you see the Statue of Liberty, it makes you think of New York City. It's iconic. When you see the Sydney Opera House, that makes you think of Australia, of Sydney. That's iconic. They call icons on your computer icons for a reason, because they represent something else. When you click on it, you make the main thing happen. So, but anyway, Superman is iconic in the real sense of the word. He literally, in a lot of ways, represents comic book superheroes, mainstream comics. And when they killed him in the 90s, that was a big deal. That was a real shakeup. That was a big deal. Huge deal. These days, they killed him. And I think there was another Superman that ended up becoming the Prime Superman that was, I think, from the pre-New 52 universe, had somehow survived, and this, that, and the other. Da, da, da. But he sort of bonded with the dying Superman, and this sort of, the current Superman came out of that. But he was dying. He died. And I remember going, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I just read it like any other thing. No big deal. That's an extreme example, but when you're constantly, oh, Wolverine's dead. And then now there's 8 Wolverines. There's 8 characters running around with Wolverine. There's all these characters running around named Spider-Man. And I like Laura Kinney, who's one of the Wolverines. I like Miles Morales a lot, but calling them all Spider-Man is stupid. But they want to have it both ways. But anyway, when you keep shaking stuff up, it's just like one of my favorite things that I've said at some jobs, thankfully not my current one, but I've had jobs when every day is an emergency, nothing's an emergency. When it's constant emergency after emergency after emergency, nothing's an emergency. So as I look through here, either they're doing a very terrible job with comic books these days, or I'm no longer the market demographic. And I'm going to say that it's probably more they're doing a terrible job with comic books these days, because comic book sales are a fraction of what they used to be. And don't tell me it's because of video games and movies and all. We had, when I was in the 80s and 90s and all that, in the 70s, especially the 80s, we had video games were a big deal. Movies were a big deal. Personal computers were a big deal. Movies were a big deal. VCRs, books. I mean, there was competition, and comic books were selling like gangbusters. So anybody says, well, it's because of video games, I just don't agree with that. Maybe a small portion, but not to the fraction of sales that comic books are at now. So they're always chasing the short-term bump at the expense of building something strong that will feel real. When they say, oh, we're going to blow up the Marvel Universe, I don't care. I'm like, who cares? You've done it 8 million times, and that character, I don't even know who that character. When Batman shows up on a comic book page today, or Spider-Man or Super, I don't even know who that character is anymore. Which version of the character is that anymore? What have they gone through? What haven't they gone through? I don't know. I mean, I guess I get it that it's a Batman. But so what? If you kill a Batman, or a Batman goes through the ringer, that doesn't have as much, impact as the Batman. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, it's almost like the stuff they could use every now and then, they're diluting. It's so like when you reinvent your universe every 3 years, 2 years or whatever, you're diluting that. And you don't even know what you're representing or reinventing anymore. The paint hasn't even dried, and you're tearing it all down and rebuilding it again. Who cares? I have no investment in that. I had zero investment in the New 52 universe. Because I saw it, like, these characters and stories are all echoes of what has come before. Now, the first time they did Crisis on Infinite Earths, back in the 80s. That was a big deal, and it was done really well. And Secret Wars was done really well. The one that was done a few years ago was really good, but the one they did back in the 80s was fantastic. That didn't destroy a universe and rebuild it, but it made some changes to some characters, and it was a big event with cosmic significance that brought a lot of major characters together for one big story. It was amazing. I loved Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I loved Secret Wars a lot. The damage that kind of storytelling, and I don't know if it's lazy or what, but just comic book companies almost getting addicted to event comics and event storytelling, because it boosts the numbers, but guess what? It's hurting your stuff over the long term. The damage, I almost wish they never happened. As good as they were amazing. I have profoundly deep, good memories of those events and reading them and where I was at and the characters involved and how they blew me away. And they just, but now it's like, here we're on Crisis 700, where everything's going to change forever. Yeah, okay, whatever. All that's doing is interrupting the books that I want to read and occasionally twisting my arm into buying a book that I normally wouldn't buy. So, anyway, I don't know if all that rant has a main point. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't. Draw me a line on X, Shane Plays, or Blue Sky, or email me at shane@shaneplays.com. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. I don't know. But everything is like, it'll change forever. I mean, every other page in these previews things, major change for everything. Nothing will ever be the same again. Well, hey, that's great and everything, but nothing's been the same for a while. How the heck do I have any clue? I'm not invested in what's going on right now, and you're shaking it up again. So, I don't know. I get it. I'm armchair quarterbacking. I'm, way back in, way far removed from the decision makers. But boy, I sure would like a chance to make some changes to the industry for the survival of comics as we know them. Now, comics will always be there, and so it's a medium, it's an art form. So comic books will always be there somehow, in some form. I don't know what it'll look like, but the monthly, mainstream comic book that I have known and loved since, really the early 80s, but even before then, but the early to mid 80s is when I just deeply fell in love. I want to see that survive. And it can. Because these characters are timeless. And you don't have to make everything, and you don't have to make everything dark and gritty and this and that and the other and blah, blah, blah. Just tell good stories. But just stop shaking everything up. Everything doesn't have to be a major upheaval. All right, that's the end of my rant, I think. I don't know. There's like 8 million rants in the middle of that. But it's just something that keeps bugging me. So, anyway. So let's go from the more general to the more specific. Specifically, some specific comic books. And this is, I think the ranting, I hope it was mild ranting and not frothing at the lips ranting. But I believe the ranting is over. So, we made it. The clouds are breaking and the sun is shining. So I want to talk about a couple of recent efforts of DC and Marvel that I've appreciated, that I think are good. I guess you could call them shakeups, or nothing will ever be the same. I don't know, but I as a geek, I reserve the right to be contradictory in my beliefs and opinions and things I like. So there's the Absolute Universe imprint range of comics from DC, and then there's the Ultimate Universe range of comics, imprint, what have you, from Marvel. They came out roughly the same time, and they are they're both heroes that we already know, or characters that we already know in some cases, but reimagined with different world building and that sort of thing. So when I was a kid, people liked to put two crawdads in a jar, and people would say shake them up and make them fight. So I'm going to shake them up and make them fight and tell you which one I am enjoying the most. And I'm not going to leave you in suspense. They're both good. I've enjoyed the stuff that both imprints are putting out. But if I had to choose one over the other, I would go with DC's Absolute Universe. I think they're being a bit bolder and telling some really interesting stories with characters that are reimagined more, I guess, than the Ultimate Universe. The concept of the Ultimate Universe is cooler. So, and don't confuse it with the Ultimate Universe from, they did Ultimate Comics starting 20 years ago or something, where the Ultimate Spider-Man, and they did Ultimate, or did the Ultimates, which was their version of the Avengers, and Ultimate X-Men and Ultimate Fantastic Four and all that. So that was destroyed during Secret Wars, where everything got destroyed and redone and shook up again. But this is the Ultimate Universe, and the setup on the Ultimate Universe is very cool, which is basically a big baddie supervillain named I believe it's the Maker. And the Maker, if I remember right, I could be totally wrong. I don't think this really spoils anything. It hasn't been really a major factor at all in any of the books so far. Is, if I remember right, the Maker is like an evil variant of Reed Richards. I could be wrong, but I think that's the case. So the Maker in this universe, which is I think 6160. I'm not. They all have numbers. Primary Marvel Earth is 616, and then it's 6160. So is this Earth in the multiverse? And what happened was this supervillain, I think, went back in time like 20 years and made it so no superheroes were created, and then let some of his own supervillains be created, and they basically run the world. So on a day-to-day, and there's there's no longer a Japan. That region of the world is called something else, and then I don't even think there's the United States of America. It's part of a larger region that's overseen. The world has been kind of cut up into regions, and they're overseen by supervillains on the Maker's Council. And then through a series of events, the Maker gets locked away, I think, for a year somehow. It's all explained if you go read these books. And so they have a year, or it's a year, 18 months, maybe 2 years. I don't know. There's a limited, let's say 18 months. There's a limited amount of time that the few heroes of the world have to try to shake things up. There I go, shake things up. But this is shaking things up in a good way, and kind of reclaim the world from the bad guys. And so what they do is, led by a very young Tony Stark, is they take people who were supposed to be heroes and never were, and give them a chance. So you got like a middle-aged Peter Parker who never became Spider-Man, suddenly being presented with, hey, we need you to be Spider-Man. Or, Giant, I don't know if he goes by Giant Man and the Wasp or Ant-Man, but they're Hawkeye, who's a different person than the Hawkeye we know. In some cases, the people are dead or turned down the offer. But in some cases, the exact same person fills the role. Like Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man, or that kind of thing. But in some cases, it's very different. Like She-Hulk is very different. Hawkeye is very different. That sort of thing. And so they're trying to fight back while they can. And they're basically, the superheroes in this world are considered terrorists. The powers that be have depicted them as terrorists, and the public, for the most part, believes that they are terrorists. So it's a very interesting setup. There's a lot you'll recognize and a lot you don't. This universe feels more like the standard Marvel universe than the absolute universe feels like the standard DC universe. It's, you feel like that it's just a couple of universes removed from the normal Marvel universe. And I have to say that as much as I love the multiverse, never had a problem with it, always thought it was cool to see variants. Boy, it's been done a lot in the past, 10 years, maybe longer in comics, and a lot of entertainment in general. But this is an interesting take on it. I enjoy this. So I'll go through the books real quick. The ongoing books. Now they've had some one-shots and stuff. They did Ultimate Universe to kick it off. That was in November of 2023, actually. Wow. We're trucking along. It's already 2025. Ultimate Universe, 1 year in, some free comic book day stuff. They had some limited series one anyway, Ultimate Invasion from 2023. And then they've got one called Ultimate Spider-Man Incursion coming out. I don't remember reading Ultimate Invasion. So I don't think you have to read it to come along on the ride here. But of course, do if you want. What am I telling you? You don't need my permission. But so you've got Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate Black Panther, Ultimate X-Men, The Ultimates, and Ultimate Wolverine. And they're all good. They're all worth reading. The Ultimates is not the Ultimates that from 20 years ago and that sort of thing, where they were sort of Nick Fury's Avengers. They worked directly for the government and all that. Sort of a more brutal, realistic version of the Avengers. No, this is like a band of heroes working together to try to stay alive and wake up other heroes and the public. It looks a little bit like the Avengers, but it's not. It's not just an Avengers, but in another universe. Ultimate Spider-Man's interesting mainly from the respect that what would Peter Parker do if he's married to Mary Jane, has kids, and suddenly becomes Spider-Man? Ultimate Black Panther is very good. Doing some stuff with, and that's by one of my personal favorite writers, Brian Edward Hill. And it's T'Challa, but a little bit different. It's also got Killmonger in it. It's got Storm. It's got this universe's version of the Sorcerer Supreme. Some really good storytelling going on in here, where he's two of the supervillains that are over Africa are Khonshu and I can't remember the other one. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on that. So Black Panther is trying to, be a ruler, take care of his kingdom, also, fight these guys off. And he's also, Brian Edward Hill is doing some stuff with vibranium that I don't think anybody else has ever done, but it works. So I always think that's cool in comics when somebody can come along and do something new with an established thing in comics, and vibranium is very established and important in Marvel Comics, and do something interesting with it, but that still feels like it fits. So, and also like there's an element to the storytelling in Ultimate Black Panther. Like there's an instance where he knows he can win a fight, but how he wins is more important than winning. So there's some interesting stuff there. Ultimate Wolverine is bonkers. It's basically if Wolverine was the Winter Soldier working for the supervillains to take out the terrorists, the resistant, the superheroes and mutants that are the resistance. And then Ultimate X-Men is the most different. This one I like a lot, but it's also the one I have the main complaint with, and it's by Peach Momoko, and it's set in what would be Japan, but it's called something different in this universe. But it's basically Japan, and it's a group of Japanese children that are becoming, or that are mutants, and so it's kind of building up the new X-Men mythos. Very, very, very different from the X-Men that you know. Very different. It really, if you know what J-horror is, which is Japanese horror, it's a genre of movies, and that and whatnot. It really feels like J-horror, right? Mixed with mutants. And that's one of its strengths. Very interesting, but it also feels incredibly removed from the rest of the Ultimate Universe that they're setting up here. Doesn't feel like it has any connection at all, really. I think maybe there's been one brief mention of other stuff going on. So, in fact, there's a character in this one called Maystorm, who is, I assume supposed to be the Storm equivalent, but yet there's already Storm running around over in Ultimate Black Panther, so it's a little weird, but it's good. And there's these really cool little tidbits in the back about Japanese culture, explaining things in Japanese culture that you'll see throughout each issue. It's Peach Momoko does the writing and the art and the coloring, and it's really cool. I recommend it, but I do think that they need to bring this into the regular Ultimate Universe. I feel like that probably what they did is they told Peach Momoko, hey, you can do X-Men, do whatever you want with it. So she's like, whatever. Okay, I'm off here telling this story. So I don't know how they're going to work it in. But anyway, so that's the Ultimate stuff, which I'm enjoying. I recommend both. I recommend this new Ultimate Universe stuff, and I recommend the Absolute Universe. But if somebody came to me and said, hey, you have to choose one or the other, I'd go with the Absolute stuff from DC. So the Absolute stuff is a little different. It's not, it's in a shared universe called Earth Alpha, whatever that means, but it's not like the Ultimate Universe from Marvel, where it's like, oh, it would have been the normal Marvel universe, but something happened to put everything off course. At least as far as we know, there's nothing like the Maker preventing people becoming superheroes, but everything's pretty different. The absolute humdinger here, my favorite, is Absolute Wonder Woman. What they've done with Wonder Woman is just really good. It's like she was raised by hell, or raised in hell. I think HEL, not the HELL, but the mythology of what she's in. But by Cersei, she's very good, pure of heart, just like the Wonder Woman we know. But she lived a very different life growing up and learned a lot of sorcerous ways, and very, very interesting stuff. And I hope that this artist comes back, because the first several issues, the artist was Hayden Sherman, and I loved it. I fell in love. And then there's a new artist that come along. I don't have it in front of me right now. Great book, looks amazing, but I prefer Hayden Sherman just because I sort of imprinted on that for this Absolute Wonder Woman book. I can't recommend Absolute Wonder Woman enough. And if you read it, try to go back to the beginning and read it from the beginning. It's just really good. Absolute Batman is probably the comic that's the closest to the Batman we know. All the elements are there. They're just kind of shaken up a little bit. I would say he's a little bit more of a blue collar Batman. But he's still Batman. He's still super smart, has tech, gadgets, fights bad guys. There is an Alfred, but the Alfred is different. And a lot of the other, the supporting cast, including the Rogues Gallery, is in the book, but in a different way. But it's still probably the most recognizable as, okay, I get it. Dude went through tragedy, has resources, is super smart, got all psyched up and learned a bunch of stuff and built a built gadgets and put together a suit and went out and started wailing on bad guys in Gotham, but it's still cool. It's just different enough that it's not the same, but it's also probably the closest. Now, Absolute Superman is good. So far, it's my least favorite of the Trinity, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman, but it's still very good. It's more of a kind of traumatized Superman who came to Earth, wasn't just a baby, went through a lot of tragedy, came to Earth as maybe a teenager or young adult, and it's very much a tale of like he's fighting for the marginalized against like oppressive corporations and government forces and stuff like that. What they did with his cape, what his cape is, and his suit and stuff like that is very interesting. But Lois Lane's quite different in this from what you would expect, and it's still good. But it's probably my least favorite of those three. Now I've only read one issue of Absolute Flash and one issue of Absolute Martian Manhunter, and I'm not sure if Absolute Green Lantern's out yet or not. It says here the publication date's April 2nd. I just haven't gotten it yet. Picked it up. It's probably sitting in my reserve list. But an Absolute Green Lantern looks like they really turned that one on its head, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. Absolute Flash was interesting. It's Jeff Lemire is going to write that, if you're into Jeff Lemire, or is writing that. And it's pretty different. The origin, the setup, about the only thing it's the same is that you have one of the main Flash characters, in this case, Wally West, gets super speed. And I read some kind of summary like there's going to be some body horror or stuff. Like the powers are scary to him. It's not just, ooh, I'm fast. This is a power fantasy. This is great. Absolute Martian Manhunter. The first issue blew me away. It's very different, very strange. But it still has the basic concept of, an alien and a detective kind of bonding together or whatever. So, but it's very, the coloring, the art, I love it. I don't know if y'all can hear my cat back there, but he's normally quiet as quiet could be. But since I'm podcasting, of course, he's gotten all, I don't even know. What are you doing over there? I don't know what he's doing. He's digging around. Find a mouse, earn your keep. So don't kill the mouse though. I'll put it out. So, but these books are, wildly different art styles, wildly different stories, but they're all set in the same universe. So in the Ultimate Comics universe, some of those characters are starting to come together and interact. That hasn't happened yet in the Absolute universe. I recommend both imprints. They're both very good. Our creative teams love to get a hold of these books where it's like, oh, it's Superman, but I don't have to worry about all the stuff that came before. I can just do a fresh start and do anything I want. And that could be good or bad. I mean, continuity in and of itself is not a bad thing. That can provide resonance, and it can provide impact, and it can provide a foundation and excitement and things. So it's not necessarily bad, but it's also interesting to see what a creative team can do. Let's say, look, it's Superman. He's super strong. He can fly. He came from Krypton. But other than that, do what you want. Or Batman or Wonder Woman, or Flash or whatever. So it's going to be interesting to see where these go. And again, so far I've been enjoying both. All right, next up, let's get all timey-wimey with some Doctor Who chat. Before I get too deep into this, I want to give a shout out to Toby Hadoke. Toby is probably the first person I've ever gotten to know and became a fan of through special features. He does a lot of the special features on the Doctor Who DVDs, and he's a massive fan, and also just massively knowledgeable on both the major stuff and the minutia of Who from all the way back to the beginning. So I just want to give him a shout out. Super nice guy. He runs a a Patreon called, I don't know what the actual name of the Patreon is. It may just be Toby Hadoke. But the name of his, I guess, podcast that he does is Happy Times and Places. And he strives very hard to just, stay out of angry fandom, and just talk about Doctor Who, his love for Doctor Who. And he has a deep love for Doctor Who. And like I said, it's just a tremendous knowledge of Doctor Who. Major force. I would say he probably considers himself a super fan. I consider him an important creator in the Doctor Who universe. Not only for his special features, but for all the other stuff he produces. He knows a tremendous amount of people behind the scenes that are involved with Doctor Who, both past and present. And he's just a darn nice guy. But his podcast, what he'll do is he'll take an episode of Doctor Who and just watch it. And he says, okay, I'm starting it, 3, 2, 1. And then he starts it, and you can start it at the same time, and he'll just give his thoughts on the episode as he goes. And as I like to say, it's like a great courses in Doctor Who, especially the minutiae. And I'm fascinated by the minutiae. I mean, he can really go deep. So if you're a Who fan and you don't know about Toby Hadoke, I highly recommend even checking Toby out. So, and Toby, on the very slim chance that you're hearing this, I appreciate your efforts and your approach very much. And say hello to, I would say Bernard, but I think you say Bernard. So say hello to your dog for me. All right. I want to talk about one of the big things that happened in the Doctor Who world recently. And if by some chance you don't know, and you might not everybody's into Who, even people who are into geeky podcasts like this. Doctor Who that's not his or her or their name, depending on who they are at any given time. It's just the Doctor. So, and one of the ongoing things in the show is they'll say, I'm the Doctor, and they'll say Doctor Who, and they say just the Doctor. So, the Doctor is a very old, from our perspective, alien, incredibly intelligent, incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly educated, a Time Lord from Gallifrey who travels the universe and space-time, can go through time and space. In the blue box, the blue police box, the TARDIS, which is much bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, always has companions, almost always has companions with them, and they always stumble, even if they're just trying to take a nice vacation or go do a touristy thing somewhere, they always stumble into craziness and end up saving the day. So anyway, New Who, which is what I and a lot of others call the Doctor Who that when it went back on the air on March 26, 2005. And as Toby and myself and others are having to admit, it's not really New Who anymore. It's been on the air for 20 years. That's a long time. To put that into a little bit of perspective, if you started watching New Who when you were 10 years old, you're 30 now. That's a lot of life to live. If one of the longest running, that was kind of the gold standard for a long time on American television, TV shows was Gunsmoke. It ran for 20 years, and that was considered boom. I mean, 20 years was like unheard of. Now, a few shows have gone past that since then, but used to, people held up like Gunsmoke as like 20 years, unbelievable. And now, like The Simpsons has been on for 35 years, which is just mind-boggling to me. And evidently, it's the longest-running American animated series, longest-running American sitcom, and the longest-running scripted primetime series. I kind of looked this up, and there's a lot of shows that get like 40 years or 20 years or 18 years, but they had a hiatus. They went off the air, came back. We're talking about on the air the whole time. So that's a long time. If Classic Who, if you want to refer to it that way, if you'll indulge me, that's how I think of it. Original Who, Classic Who. It ran from 1963 to 1989, so that's 26 years. And here we are in the 20th year of New Who. We got to think of a different term for it. So it's not far off of matching the original run, which was considered a very long, major part of British culture, and by extension, other. I know the Australians and the Americans got into Who big time, as did other countries. But it's part of American pop culture as well, especially since it came back on the air. America really started paying attention. I met a lot of people who never watched any of classic Who. In fact, they can't watch it. They have a hard time with it because it's a different style of TV and production values and this and that. But they love them some new Who. Still, got to come up with a different name these days. Need to think up of a different name. I mean, it's all Who. It's all Doctor Who, right? But there was a pretty big break. Went off the air in 1989. You had a TV movie that had its pros and cons. One of the major pros, it introduced Paul McGann as the Eighth Doctor, which I love. Also has one of the best TARDIS interiors. I love that TARDIS interior. Yet, they did a TV movie, so we got a little bit of Who in between. But as far as an ongoing TV show, it was off the air between 1989 and 2005. What is that, 16 years? So there's a pretty big gap. So there is, even though it's all one TV show, there's different styles. It went to, different production values, modern ways of doing TV, all of that. So it's the same show, but it's different. Just like when the Doctor regenerates, it's the same Doctor, but it's different. So the show regenerated. I don't know if I've ever thought of it that way before. That's kind of cool. So anyway, also to put that into perspective, on March 26, 2005, Rose aired. So there was, I'm recording this on April 25th. So roughly about a month ago, we had the 20th anniversary of Who returning to the air with Rose. And also, Toby Hadoke does a really good watch of Rose and gave me new perspective on Rose. And the Ninth Doctor, who is, I love all the Doctors. I think every actor and every character of each regeneration of the Doctor, or each version of the Doctor, is good. They've never had a bad Doctor, in my opinion. They've had some that appeal to me more than others. So the Ninth Doctor was never my favorite, but now I'm looking at him in a different way 20 years later, and through the lens of the people who love him or see him in a different light. So I'm going back and rewatching some of that and enjoying it very much. But to continue with the perspective, in March 1985, which was 20 years before March 2005, so 20 years before Doctor Who came back to the airwaves. I wonder if it's even, is it really the airwaves anymore? Most people get their stuff over the internet in some fashion, but I guess the colloquialism, the vernacular is the airwaves. So 20 years before Doctor Who returned to the airwaves, the Sixth Doctor was on the air. In that month, you had Colin Baker, who I like Colin Baker. I like Colin Baker a lot. There was problems with his run behind the scenes, I think, maybe, but I like him as the Doctor quite a bit. His serials Time Lash and Revelation of the Daleks were on. And then 20 years before that, you were all the way back to the first Doctor, William Hartnell, with episodes of The Web Planet and The Web Planet and The Crusade. So that from the first, in over 20 years, they went from the first Doctor to the Sixth Doctor. Right, the Seventh Doctor was on until 1989, and then that's when the show went off the air. But even the Seventh Doctor, who's one of my personal favorites because that was the Doctor that I would catch on PBS in America, he was the current Doctor when I started kind of watching it. I got to give a shout out. I always do. My friend Johnny Wood got me into several things, including Doctor Who and Blake 7. I also need to give a shout out to my friend and co-worker at the time, Darren Clift, when Doctor Who came back on the air in 20 years ago. I wasn't really paying much. I was not the Doctor Who fan then that I am now, even though I like Doctor Who, and it was much more of a fan than the average person, especially in the States. I thought it was a reboot. I wasn't really paying attention. I was like, why is this guy running around in a black leather coat? Are they trying to make the Doctor cool? Da da da. And Darren, I was talking to him, and I was like, no, it's the same show. It's it's a regeneration of the original. It's really good. Check it out. So I did. So thanks to, I imagine I eventually would have vectored back into Doctor Who anyway, but it was specifically because of conversations with Darren that got me paying attention to New Who, and then of course I became a fan like many other people. So I started kind of watching it, and that was the Doctor, and one of the first serials I can remember watching on my own, just turning it on and watching it, seeking it out on PBS, was it Remembrance of the Daleks? The first time you saw the Daleks go up the stairs, and the Doctor supercharges Ace's bat with the hand of, I would say Omega, but whenever I watch Doctor Who, it sounds like they're saying Omega. And then she tears up the Dalek with the bat. Love Ace. So that was 1989 when it went off the air. So I don't know if I'm doing a good point or doing a good job here of kind of showing the perspective of that, by this point with Doctor Who returning to the air 20 years ago, it has established itself as just as much Who as classic Who. It's, let's see, we've had Christopher Eccleston as the ninth Doctor. We've had David Tennant as the 10th Doctor. David Tennant, of course, is a beloved Doctor, universally, loved like Tom Baker was in the original run of Who. We've had Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor, Peter Capaldi as the 12th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor, and then Ncuti Gatwa, I believe I'm saying that right, is, you could say the 14th, but I think they're saying he's the 15th Doctor because the Doctor regenerated after Jodie Whittaker's Doctor back into David Tennant's Doctor. So it as with all things Doctor Who, it's never straightforward, but it's always fun. And in Ncuti Gatwa, I just want to give a shout out. The first season of his stuff, I checked out a few episodes and it wasn't really grabbing me. But with this new season, with the introduction of his new companion Belinda and what they're doing, I've really enjoyed both episodes. So I'm revisiting Ncuti Gatwa and I'm going to go rewatch his first season with a different eye. His energy, his enthusiasm is great, and for the first time, we don't have a Doctor that has a wardrobe, like just wears the same thing all the time. But it's finally dawned on me that Ncuti Gatwa's wardrobe is just fashion. He's always going to wear something fashionable, so he's never just going to wear one. Like I'm going to pick an outfit and stay in it. His outfit is his outfits, his approach to dress. So anyway, the point is you've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 individual Doctors, 7 if you count David Tennant popping up twice in the new run. We've been on the air for 20 years, so it is its own thing. It is no longer. If anybody's thinking of it this way, an experiment, can they make another go of Doctor Who? It's just, in my opinion, it's just as established as original Doctor Who was. I don't know if it got as deep into culture over in Britain as it did here, but I would say Doctor Who never really hit the mainstream in America until it came back on the air, 20 years ago. So. Just quick note on that. We had that 20th anniversary. If you haven't watched Rose, go watch it. Go listen to Toby Hadoke's thoughts on Rose. It'll give you a new appreciation for what they're doing and how they approached bringing Doctor Who back on. And the way Toby does it, he will eventually make his stuff public. But if you're part of his Patreon, you get to listen when it first airs, and then you can comment. Like if it's a multi-series, like if he's doing some classic Who, and he's, it's like a 4-part episode, he'll do one episode at a time. So 4 different podcasts covering one episode each. And as you comment, he'll work that into the future episodes. But if you don't support the Patreon, I think you can eventually find it on YouTube or something anyway. Look for Happy Times and Places, his Doctor Who podcast. And speaking of going deep on Doctor Who, a super fan. I'm mega fan. Recently, and I'll post the link to this story in the show notes when the episode drops. So go to shaneplays.com or look in the show notes on whatever platform you're getting the podcast on. So an ailing, here's the headline. Ailing Doctor Who superfan spends fortune to recreate 97 lost episodes to see complete, in quote, series before he dies. This is the New York Post, and it's from April 13th. So here's what, okay, so there's a super fan who's, I guess, been known in Doctor Who fan circles for quite some time, named Ian Levine. He's 71 years old now. He's been a fan since Doctor Who first broadcast in 1963, and he recently spent around $130,000 or 100,000 pounds to recreate as best as possible lost episodes of Doctor Who. So one of the elements of being a Doctor Who fan when it comes to classic Who is there are missing episodes. And the reason for that is at the time, this stuff was considered disposable. You know, you broadcast it and move on. You know, now it's considered, treasure. But at the time, the BBC would wipe tapes, I guess, so that they could reuse them. And so Doctor Who would broadcast and they would wipe the tape. So there's a tremendous amount of missing episodes from the earlier years of Doctor Who. I believe most of them are from the William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton years. So, and they get recreated sometimes officially by the BBC through animation. Has been a popular one recently, or they have these things called telesnaps, where they would take pictures of the TV at an interval, capturing, screen captures basically, but using a camera, not a computer, way back in the day. Every few seconds or once a minute, or I don't know how often it was, they would take a picture and they take those and then they put the audio of the episode, because a lot of cases the audio is around but the video isn't. But so the BBC's been doing that more and more, where they animate, they take the audio and the surviving photos and whatnot, and they use those to animate. And I like those a lot, actually. I buy those whenever they drop. But what Ian did was he spent 70,000 pounds of his own money, and he raised 30,000 pounds from with other people. Kind of, I don't know if it was a GoFundMe or something like that. Probably something similar. And he said, I don't want to die, because he's very ill. He says he's come close to death 4 times, and he's currently battling nasal cancer and has been confined to a wheelchair since a stroke 11 years ago. So he feels like he's about to pass, and he wants to see all the episodes, again, like he watched them growing up as a kid. So what he did was he raised this money, and he used a lot of different techniques to... He said he searched all over the world, and this is where it gets controversial, and I'll share my thoughts on it after sharing the story. He found people, designers all over the world, that could make moving AI images out of production photos, notes, and actual audio from the stories. So, and again, remember, this isn't for public consumption. This is a personal thing that he wants to do, so he can watch Doctor Who again from beginning to end as close as possible to the original broadcast. So he said he found a lot of scammers. He probably paid 10,000 pounds just in ripoffs, but he did, finally get it done. They're not authorized by the BBC. He's not selling them. He's just watching them himself, and I guess he's sharing with a small group of friends and diehards who contributed to the effort. So here's the thing. One, I mean, that shows the depths of the Doctor Who fandom. And before I go deeper into this, evidently, Ian Levine is evidently, as they say, a polarizing figure in Doctor Who fandom. I guess he has very strong opinions about the show and what should and shouldn't happen, and he's not intimidated or shy from sharing those opinions. So he's polarizing to begin with. Now, this is going to be further polarizing. Let me return to my original point. So this shows the depths of fandom, right? You have somebody that is about to die or feels they're about to die. And it seems, I mean, they're very sick, it seems like. And he wants to watch Doctor Who as closely as he can to how I remembered, but just watching the episodes as a kid. So he was a music producer and evidently an unofficial advisor to the show in the 80s. I guess BBC had unofficial advisors, fan advisors, people who knew Doctor Who deeply. I guess they would help advise the show. So he spent all this money, mostly because he was a music producer, spent $70,000 of his own money, and then, raised the rest so other people wanted to see this happen too, and created a private library of reconstructed Doctor Who using AI. But of course, AI is, that's a hot button topic, to put it mildly. You got people that just despise AI, for creating things, and they're very against it. So he's catching a lot of crud for that. Here's my take on it. So as long as this isn't done for a commercial endeavor, he doesn't try to compete with what the BBC's doing. It's for personal. I mean, the man's dying and just wants to watch Doctor Who. It's one of his comfort things. I don't care if he used AI, right? For a personal project. I would at some point. I don't want to watch the whole library. It's not my business. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of it here and there just to see what it looks like, to see what AI and all these efforts was able to accomplish. But as long as he doesn't try to compete with the BBC or, whatever. Now, I imagine, knowing what fandom is, this stuff is going to leak out there if it hasn't already. But as long as he doesn't try to make a profit or anything like that, and assuming sincerely that his goal, right? I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that his goal was, I just want to watch these with my friends, before I die. I got no problem with this. I mean, it just shows the depths of love that he has for this. The probably my guess is because AI. I'm not trying to say that people have to like AI. I'm not saying that every aspect of AI is great. There are troublesome aspects of AI. But I think 10, 20 years down the road, they're going to say, oh, look, what Adam, or I keep wanting to say Adam Levine, what Ian Levine did with all these, it showed us what could be done. Down the road, I think that AI is here to stay, whether we like it or not. I'm not saying that, well, you just have to like it. I'm just saying it's here. It's not going anywhere. Okay? The Pandora's box has been opened. AI is here. So whether whatever laws are passed or this or that or the other, people are going to use AI to push the envelope. So it could be in several years from now that the BBC might take a cue from what has happened here. They may not. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know the future. But I am curious. I would like to see what was done. And again, as long as it was done just for private consumption, I have no problem with this. But I have seen people literally, I posted the link around on social media and most people bypass, hey, this guy's dying. There's a personal project, super fan, and they go straight to AI is evil. And for me personally, I think it's more of a nuanced, complex story than that. I see the human element and the AI element. So we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting. But I would, like to see a little bit of it just to see what it was able to accomplish. It could be terrible. It may look awful. Or it may look great. Who knows? So, but at the end of the day, Ian, enjoy your private collection. I hope it brings you the memories that you wanted. And please guard this and don't use it in a way that is illegal or that hurts the efforts of other fans. That would be my take on it. So moving right along, pulling the lever in the TARDIS to see where we go next. Looks like we'll be crying havoc and letting roll the dice of war, or not, as the case may be. Let's talk about D&D 2024, Dungeons & Dragons 2024. So, I think back in 2014, somewhere around in there, 10 years or a little longer, D&D 5th edition came out. It was a very successful edition. It was also a time when D&D got a huge boost in pop culture and coolness in general. People were playing D&D as if it were cool in ways that it had never been perceived before. A lot of people were playing the game. You had stuff like Critical Role. Big Bang Theory on TV was featuring it. Stranger Things was featuring it. It started showing up everywhere. D&D was huge. D&D was cool. So for about a decade, more or less, we've had a great run on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Well, starting in 2024, last September, the new Player's Handbook came out. If you don't know, Dungeons & Dragons is based on 3 core rule books. So you had the Player's Handbook came out September 2024. The Dungeon Master's Guide was in November 2024. And then the Monster Manual, which is what it sounds like, a big book full of monsters that you can use for the game. And creatures and even humans, I think, get an entry. They're a potential monster, released in February of 2025. So the interesting thing for me about D&D 2024 is in the past, when they've released a new version, new edition of D&D, they haven't really tried to play it both ways. Now, the closest they came to that was way back in the day, the vague, misty days of yesteryear, when you had D&D 3rd edition, and fairly quickly they did D&D 3.5. They did enough updates to the game to justify a point release, if you will. But usually they just say, okay, we've gone from first to second, second to third, third to fourth, fourth to fifth, and then fifth to what you would assume would be 6th edition, or, whatever they want to call it. In this case, it's D&D 2024. We're saying, look, this isn't a new edition of the game. No, it's not a new edition of the game. Just kind of we polished up the rules a little bit. Well, I'll get to that. We'll look at that a little bit, and I will give you my opinion on whether this is just heck, it's D&D 5th edition with some errata fixes. Errata means errors. Like, we have to put out stuff that corrects errors, and just a couple of tweaks to make the game better. We'll determine if it's that, or did they give us a new edition. I will give you my firm opinion on that before everything's done. Yeah, before we talk about that, what's really interesting to me, nobody I know, and man, this sounds like I'm ranting or knocking it. I'm really not. I'm just observing. I'm neither rooting for or against D&D 24 or Wizards of the Coast, although I will say Wizards of the Coast, which is really Hasbro. Hasbro owns Wizards of the Coast, and Wizards of the Coast does Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering, among other things. Wizards of the Coast has managed to bother, I guess would be a good word, its customer base a few times recently, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. So D&D 24, I don't know anyone who's playing it. I don't know anyone who was excited for it. Nobody in my gaming circle seems to care about it at all. I don't know anybody else in my extended gaming circle or people that they know that either A, was looking forward to 2024 or is playing it now. I see hardly any discussion of it online. Nobody's like, oh, this is great, or I can't wait, or did it, before it came, I saw no anticipation. And now that it's out, I really don't see any chatter. Now, that doesn't mean that no one is playing this version of D&D or D&D 2024. I will issue my opinion later on whether it's a new version. That doesn't mean it's not being played. I'm just saying my ear is to the ground on gaming news, role playing games, and that much more than the average bear. And this just, I'm not saying it's dead on arrival. I'm just saying nobody seems to be talking about it. Nobody seems to was full of anticipation to play it. Like when they went from 4th edition to 5th edition, there was a lot of noise out there about it among the players. And here we are, D&D 5th edition came out, let's just call it a decade ago. All right, it's not exact, but that's close enough. So you think that there would be all this discussion and excitement and even people angry, or, usually when a major change comes along to Dungeons and Dragons, there's something going on around it, whether it's for or against. And I just have seen barely anything. Tepid might be the best way to explain it. I've seen news articles covering it. Hey, this is coming. Here's some changes. But I don't see any chatter online. And it could be just that there's other gaming circles that are just eating it up and have just, run rampant with D&D 24 or 2024. And I'm just not seeing it. So, I would love to know, is anybody out there, I earlier in the podcast, hit me up on X at Shane Plays, or email me at shane@shaneplays.com, or, find me on Threads or Blue Sky. It'll be a variant of Shane Plays. You should be able to look at my post pretty quick and figure out if it's me. Well, are you playing it? Do you care? I just see nothing, and my, my personal gaming group, everyone's just like, yeah, whatever. It's just like they just don't care. I don't even think, like in the past, I would have bought the books just to look through them and to talk about them and do coverage. I used to cover every little D&D thing that came out. Now I'm just like, whatever, if somebody gave me, I'm not asking anybody to give me the books, don't get me wrong, but if somebody just gave them to me, I'd say, hey, thank you very much, and I'd take them and look through them, but I have no desire to go out and spend any money, and I'm not in favor of raising the Jolly Roger and finding them that way. So, anyway, that's just something I've noticed. Like I said, I do not mean that as an attack on Wizards of the Coast or D&D or whatever. It's something I've noticed has been very distinct to me, the lack of chatter, excitement, either for or against D&D 2024. Now, I kind of talked earlier about when DC did Rebirth, and that was where they kind of reinvigorated or relaunched their books, their comic books, without it being a reboot. But it was kind of a reboot. It was a reboot in like tone, and there was some changes to characters and some other stuff. So it was like the reboot that wasn't a reboot. It was really kind of, they were trying to go for the positive effects of a reboot without actually calling it a reboot. And I kind of feel like that's what Wizards of the Coast is doing with D&D 2024. So again, I haven't played it. All I can do is go out there and research what people are saying about it, whether officially or not. And I found this humdinger of just a ding-dong daddy of a webpage. It's from rpgbot.net. And I will link this in the show notes. Go to shaneplays.com or look in the show notes wherever you find your show notes, and this is at rpgbot.net, and it says D&D 5e to 2024 transition guide and changelog, everything that's different in the new 2024 player's handbook. And this is a this is a resource right here. Go check it out. They really break it down, every change in the player's handbook, and the player's handbook is really the core rules of D&D. Now that the Dungeon Master's Guide will have some stuff, and the Monster Manual will have some stuff, but the player's handbook is where you learn how do I build a character, how do I create a character, how does all the different rules work, how does combat work, how does spell casting work, where are all the spells. So really, it's the core rule book of the 3 core rule books. And there is a long list of changes here, and you could argue that those are mainly cosmetic or reorganization to make things more readable. And actually, looking through this post, it does sound like that they made some positive changes to the books as far as how they're organized and the readability and the charts and this and that and the other. So, I'm happy to give credit where credit's due. That that sounds good. There's always room to improve, and I thought, the 5th edition books in and of themselves were laid out well and had nice artwork and all of those things. So it's nice that they're continuing to improve that. So let's but to get down to the nuts and bolts, is it a new edition? Is this a new edition of D&D? And let's, I guess I would make the definition as is this a new edition of D&D or not, rather than just a refresh of an existing edition, which is kind of how they're putting it out. Like, oh no, it's not a whole new full edition. Well, and to be honest, I don't know why they're not wanting to put out. I mean, there's nothing wrong with putting out another edition. It's been a decade, so I don't really know why they're like, oh, we don't want to do a whole new edition at this point. Maybe because 5th edition is so popular, and it is a good edition. I mean, it's very playable. It has some good rules in it. The combat doesn't take forever, but it's got some crunch in it. So it's not a terror. It's a good edition. I've always said that it's a good edition of D&D. So maybe because it's probably the most popular edition of D&D that's ever been out there as far as sales and the amount of people playing it, then maybe they don't want to get away from 5th edition. People are like, no, 5th edition's great. We don't want to leave 5th edition. Like, there was when Microsoft went to Vista from XP, they could not crowbar people off because they loved XP. So I think this is kind of their way of saying, no, it's still XP. It's just, XP 2024. It's not Vista. If that comparison makes any sense for, comparing Windows to D&D. So maybe that's why they're not wanting it to call it 6th edition. It's not a whole new edition. I mean, anyway, my definition, I guess, would be, can you take the books and the character sheets from D&D 5th edition that came out in 2014 and D&D 2024, can you set at the same table with all of it and play it together? And if you can, then it is not a new edition. If you can't, then it is a new edition if you can't play them together seamlessly. So, or at least with very minor, I could say it's like, okay, you got one minor difference in how this rule works, or what. Okay, then yeah, it's basically the same edition. So let's look at what my super crack research team, actually, which is just me searching the internet, but it's a crack research team of professionals out there combing all available information, going door to door, conducting on-the-street interviews, and in some cases rappelling down the sides of buildings and smashing in through a window to surprise suspects. Let's see what they found when it comes to is D&D 2024 a new edition. So here are some examples that I'm going to base my opinion on. In that very RPG bot transition guide link thingy that I mentioned just minutes ago, it kind of sums that there's a section that says mixing 2014 and 2024 content. It says, using 2014 character options on 2024 characters may work on a case-by-case basis, but the 2024 rules largely assume that you're not using the legacy rules. So, and it goes on to say, using 2024 characters with the 2014 rules will not work. So, in other words, using the 2024 characters with the 5e rules, 5th edition rules, and it's supposed to all be 5th edition, as I understand it. The original one, it says they won't work because they're built assuming that you have things like that are new rules from 2024. So the AI, when you do a Google search now, you get an AI summary. I didn't specifically ask AI this, but I asked, Google, hey, can you play them together? And the AI summary was, yes, you can generally use D&D 5e rules with 2024 with some important considerations. While D&D 2024 is designed to be backward compatible with 5e, it also introduces significant changes and new rules. So we'll expand on that here in a second, what that backwards compatibility means. But that comment is significant changes and new rules. So AI went through and sorted all the answers out there online, and that's what it came back with. So, hey, there's significant changes in your rules here. Blizzard Watch, the site Blizzard Watch, they said, yes, the 2024 Player's Handbook is backwards compatible with older D&D 5e content. But that compatibility only goes in one direction. You can use older content with your 2024 game without much difficulty, but you can't take 2024 content and make it work with 2014 rules, not without a lot of work. And the rules you play with are one or the other, not a mix of both. You can use 2014 rules and content or 2024 rules and a mix of content, and that's it. That's how they're saying it. And a Reddit user said, essentially, 2024 is backwards compatible, but 5e is not forwards compatible with 2024. So mixing all that together, here is the official Shane Plays Geek Talk verdict on whether 2024 is a new edition. So here's my take. If characters from 5e and 2024 can't be used together without issues, and it sounds like significant issues depending on which way you're going, and I need to buy new books to get the full new experience, it's a new edition. No matter how they want to spin it, how they want to call it, this is a new edition of D&D. Now, I may sit down and play it and come up with a different takeaway. However, I think enough evidence is there based on, the official line of D&D or Wizards of the Coast and what people are saying to come up. This is different enough that I think it qualifies as saying it's a new edition. They don't work seamlessly together, and if they don't work seamlessly together, it's a new version of D&D. It's just, and they've also made changes to the tone of some of the stuff. How races work. I don't think they call them races anymore, but some of the tone and the stuff that has been part and parcel of what people think of as how D&D works, since the beginning has been changed. So it's not just a rules thing; it's an approach to kind of how a D&D works. And if I did mention official stance. So the official stance of Wizards of the Coast is that 2014 characters can be used with 2024, but 2024 characters will not work well the other way. So again, it's a new version. I think there's enough empirical data here, if you will, to come to the conclusion that it is a new version of D&D. And I will go on to say it's a new edition. One other bit of D&D discussion here before we move on. Chris Perkins has already left Wizards of the Coast, the D&D team and Wizards of the Coast in general. And Jeremy Crawford, I think, is soon to leave if he hasn't left already. These are two major names, major forces, if you will, at Wizards of the Coast for D&D. Chris Perkins has been with, I don't know if it was TSR then. I'd have to go do my, research, but he's been with TSR and or Wizards of the Coast since 1997. And Jeremy Crawford, I think, has been there since 2007. Chris Perkins was like I said, he's already gone. He's already announced, hey, I've retired, I've gone. He was there for 28 years. And even before that, I think he was like, a fan submitting articles to like Dragon Magazine or maybe Dungeon, probably Dragon. And then Jeremy Crawford was, an award-winning designer and then came on board with Wizards of the Coast. And they were both major parts of the 5th edition team that, with 5th edition being incredibly successful and important for role-playing and Wizards of the Coast. When I say that 5th edition has been important for role-playing, you have to understand that as D&D goes, in a lot of ways, as goes the hobby. When D&D is on an upswing, the hobby goes on an upswing, and vice versa. It's just how it is. A lot of people will, you say you want to play D&D when they really mean some other game. It's just, that's how it is. It's the big 800-pound gorilla in the RPG hobby niche, however you want to put it. Both these guys evidently had timed their departure after D&D 2024 was released. So in the way this is all being discussed and presented is there's no drama. They were just both like, hey, it's time to go. And they have been there for a while. And Chris Perkins also, I have to give him credit. He's been a great ambassador for Dungeons & Dragons, but like a public face doing, running live games at large, kvetches and stuff like that. I think more people probably know who Chris Perkins is than Jeremy, but the people that, are aware of the D&D team definitely know Jeremy Crawford. So both of them leaving is like 40 years worth of experience combined leaving this team. And, of course, Wizards of the Coast like, oh, it's fine. Where other people are ready to fill the roles and we wish them the best of luck. And I hope that's the case. I hope there's no drama here. We don't always have to have drama. I just wanted to say particularly, for Chris Perkins, I wish you well. I know you're not going to hear this, but I'm just saying in general, I've interviewed you once or twice, interacted with you online and whatnot, and you just seem to be a genuinely nice guy, and you've been a good ambassador for Dungeons & Dragons and for the hobby. And for Jeremy Crawford, I haven't interacted with you on the same level. I think maybe I've bumped into you once or twice online. I don't think I've ever interviewed you. I wish you well as well. And if you either of you re-engage with the hobby professionally on a level, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I will say, no matter how Wizards of the Coast is communicating on this, and whether there's drama or not, they're both like, hey, we've had D&D's 50th anniversary, we've got D&D 2024 out the door. We've been here for a while. It's a good time to move on. And let's just say that's what it is. Let's say there's no drama. There's no way that this doesn't leave a hole in the D&D team. Even if they have great, game producers and story people and all of that. This is a big hole of experience and leadership. So, I hope it goes as well as possible for the D&D team to move forward. And there are times for people to move on and for others to step up. But losing a combined 40 years experience of two people who have been instrumental in successful products on your team, that's a big deal. So again, I hope it goes well. I'm not rooting for anyone to fail. I just don't quite buy Wizards of the Coast line. Oh, it's wonderful. It's perfect. this is all great, because of course the corporate line would not indicate that there'd be any challenges or whatever. But on the other hand, it's kind of a backwards, it's kind of an insult to Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins. If you go, oh no, it's fine for them to leave. It makes no difference whatsoever. Oh really? They didn't matter to your team. So, but of course I understand that the corporate line has to be all positive and rainbows and sunny skies and chirping birds and all that. So anyway, good luck, Chris Perkins. Good luck, Jeremy Crawford. May the dice be ever in your favor. And moving right along into a related topic to D&D and tabletop role-playing games and board games and etc. is everyone's favorite topic of the moment, tariffs. So I have seen a lot of discussion, as I'm sure you have heard and seen and read, a lot of discussion on tariffs with what the current American administration is doing with tariffs on other countries, on goods imported from other countries. So, and I've seen a lot of good analysis and debate, and I've also seen a lot of instant expert stuff, which is neither correct nor particularly helpful. I'm sure if you've been online for any amount of time in your life, you know what I mean by the instant experts who pop up. It seems like a simple discussion on the surface. It can get more complex. So a tariff, and this is about as boring as I'm going to get with the economics of it, is, and somebody will quibble with me on this, and that's fine, but the definition that I'm going to put out right now is sufficient for the discussion that I'm about to have or embark upon, is essentially a tax placed on incoming goods from other countries. So whether it's China or Lithuania or Canada or Mexico or Rwanda, whatever, on a country by country basis, different countries. And the United States is by no means the only country that does tariffs. But what has happened recently is, for better or worse, I'm not going to get into the political dimension of it. I'm not going to jump up and say, hey, what they're doing is the dumbest thing ever, or it's the greatest thing ever. I'm not going to get into all that. Everyone has their own opinion, and you can form your own. What I am going to do is try to talk about the practical impact on game companies. And most RPG, tabletop RPG game publishers, and to some extent board games are from smaller companies in a lot of cases too, are from small companies. You have a few big ones out there. Of course, you've got Wizards of the Coast, which is backed by Hasbro. And then you have some other, larger companies. And then you've got Asmodee, which is a company, I think a European company that owns a lot of board game companies and stuff. And then you've got like Parker Brothers and stuff for board games. So there are some companies out there that are operating on a different level, but for the most part, when it comes to the tabletop RPG space and a lot of board games, they're operating on a very small basis and are very, very, very subject to and impacted by changes in the market. They don't have like a Hasbro behind them. So this is, taking, the actual politics out of it. What has happened is, from a practical level on these companies, these small publishers can be anywhere from one person to 20 or 100. I would argue that a 50-person company is still pretty small, compared to how, your larger companies out there that can plan and absorb this kind of thing. So they're impacted. And when the United States decided to engage in a tariff war under the, and again, I'm not agreeing with this or disagreeing with this. They're just saying, hey, we've been getting a raw deal for a long time, so we're gonna throw some tariffs out there to make a point and try to get better economic deals for the United States. So you've had tariffs going up, I think in some cases, over 100%. So the tax on an, like if in a lot of board games and tabletop role playing game stuff, including like dice, it's not just the books. The dice and the accessories and things are printed and manufactured in China, and then shipped back here to the States, and that's all, or to the United Kingdom or to Germany, wherever it is they're being sent to. In this case, the tariffs are, specifically on stuff coming into the United States from, China or wherever. We'll talk mainly in terms of China, because China in the past few decades has leveraged itself to be sort of the world's manufacturer, and businesses all over the world have taken advantage of that. Hey, you want to manufacture this stuff, and if you can keep costs low, then sure, we'll use your manufacturing resources. So suddenly, almost overnight, extremely high tariffs go into place, which means that if you're operating, let's say you have a widget that you're selling for $8, you have it manufactured in China, and once all the costs are involved, from manufacturing to shipping to this, that, and the other, selling it to the customer, whatever. Let's say you make $1.50 per widget you sell. And that's the kind of margin that, that's actually a pretty good margin for some companies. If you suddenly throw 150% increase, 50% even, tariff tax, if you will, on that's going to mess up the economics of a lot of companies. So that's the practical reality. All right, there's a larger discussion to be had here, but that's the reality that a lot of publishers are facing right now. And consider that you have a Kickstarter, right? And this is the case with Ian World, which, my friend Russ Morris, he shared, some stuff about this. In fact, ianworld.org, and I'll put some links on the show notes at shaneplays.com. There's several good articles talking about this from the perspective of game publishers. But let's say you did a Kickstarter, and in that Kickstarter, you had all your reward levels, pledge levels, estimated or set based on what you assumed the cost of production in China and then shipping it back over would be. So the Kickstarter closes, you collect your money, you go into production, etc. And then boom, here comes this tariff. So you can't go back to the customer. You can't go back to the Kickstarter supporter. And there's a lot of companies, Ian World or Ian Publishing included, that, Kickstarter is their main business model. And you can't go back to the people. Now, some people might be like, hey, we understand, and they don't mind fessing up some extra money. But you really can't go back to people and say, hey, you can't have your product until you pay extra X on shipping now because this tariff came along. So what eats that, right? Where does that money come from? Some companies can roll with that, and some can't. So that's what's going on right now. And to us, if you're in the tabletop role-playing hobby, or if you're in, board games or whatever, you probably don't realize how much of a niche hobby or market that is compared to the greater economy. It's really very small, and the chances of the government going, oh, we're hurting all these small publishers, so we've got to change these tariffs is slim to none. So these publishers have to figure out how to deal with this. But behind all of the fun, the rolling of the dice, the dungeon crawling and sci-fi adventures and whatever game you're playing, whatever's behind all that, there is a business model on some level. You have to produce a thing, and then you have to sell that thing. And unless you're just doing it as a hobby or whatnot, you've got to make some kind of money off of it, or at least break even. You can't just lose money on that. Now, I'm sure there's a very small amount of people and companies out there that can, because they're operating on some weird basis that most aren't, like, hey, I had an inheritance. I don't care if I make any money. I just want to make games. Okay, fine. Or whatever. That's just some weird example I threw out there. What are you going to do when your business model gets thrown off that much? So let's look at some. There's some good articles out there. One of them is from Lauren Coleman at Catalyst Game Labs, and they have a very. I'll put this link on the show notes. They've got a very long breakdown. And a lot of it is factual. Some of it is editorializing. And for example, it says tariffs rolling dice against American game publishers. That's the name of the post. Now, Catalyst is currently known for brands like BattleTech, Shadowrun. They publish some fiction and some board games, and they've gone from, in 2007, $200,000 looks like revenues to in 2021 over 4 million in sales. So this is Lauren Coleman's perspective. He's the CEO and the owner. It's worth reading. He does editorialize a little bit at the beginning. He says, I feel obligated to publish my own thoughts on these capricious and unsustainable taxes. I agree that they're unsustainable. Time will tell if it's capricious. So it seems capricious. We'll see. I'm not even going to speak for or against the tariff war as far as whether it should have started. I will say that now that we're in it, whether we like it or not, whoever blinks or whatever metaphor or analogy you want to use, whoever backs down, whoever blinks first, their citizens will suffer economically in some way long term. So that's all I'll say on it. Now that we're in it, I certainly hope that the pain is worth it, and then we come out on the other side better off than we started. But Lauren really does a really good job of breaking down, saying, hey, here's my experience. I know what I'm doing, and going into the realities and the fiscal realities of these tariffs on game publishers. And I would even, Catalyst seems like a big company, but in the great scheme of things, they're not a big company. They're going to get hurt by this. They're not a Hasbro. So just because you make however many million in sales in a year, that's your revenues. Who knows what their profit is, right? There's a huge difference between revenue and profit. And the tariffs are going to eat up profit, just eat up profit. So I do recommend checking this out. He really gets into it on, and others too. It's like, why does the publisher have to raise prices? What does it matter? China pays for the tariff, and just make the games here in the States. And that's a common refrain you're going to hear is, well, just make the games here in the States. And Lauren and others, Steve Jackson from Steve Jackson Games, Lauren, other people out there are saying you can't, because see, what's happened is because China has leveraged itself as the world's manufacturer, we don't have the capacity. Even if suddenly America decided that we wanted to bring a lot of manufacturing back to America, which could be one of the results of this, and that might be one of the reasons why the administration is pushing these crazy weird tariffs out of the blue. I don't know, but we don't have it. Even if the will was suddenly here, we do not have the manufacturing capacity to suddenly take on all this. So, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, can we shift? Sure, that could happen, but it can't happen right now. As far as China paying for the tariffs, it's somebody's going to pay the tariff, but China's not going to say, well, we'll pay those tariffs. They're going to make the people who are importing stuff pay the tariffs. Why are they just going to suddenly jump up and offer to pay that? So this is happening. One thing that I'm not seeing a lot of discussion of, but but Lauren from Catalyst Games bring this up. This is happening on the heels of COVID, and COVID drove the cost of international shipping way up. So, that has already increased the prices. Manufacturers and publishers and whatnot have sort of have rolled with that. And then here we go with the tariffs, driving it up way high. So, but the bottom line is China's not just going to jump up and say, well, heck, we'll pay those tariffs. It's going to be the people bringing stuff in. Like if it wasn't going to be the companies that had stuff manufactured and shipped back to the United States, for example, the companies wouldn't, I don't care if the tariff went up. China's going to pay for that. No, China's not going to pay for it. It's going to come out of the profit margin which may no longer be a profit margin, maybe a loss. Imagine going through all that work, doing all that, selling units, this, that, and the other, and then you end up, because a tariff comes along as you weren't expecting, taking a loss. So that is what the publishers, these small game companies that are a huge part of, or at least for me, and I'm assuming a lot of people that listen to this podcast, it's part of the things we love to do. So let's take a look at what some other game publishers are saying about tariffs. This is from an article on ianworld.org, and it's literally called "What Game Publishers Are Saying About the Tariffs." These links again will be on the show notes at shaneplays.com. And the Game Manufacturers Association, GAMA, said the latest imposition of a 54% tariff. Now notice that it says 54% tariff. It's gone up since then on products from China by the administration is dire news for the tabletop industry. And they go on to argue the broader economic, or the broader U.S. economy. Steve Jackson Games says, why not manufacture in the U.S.? I wish we could, but the infrastructure to support full-scale board game production, especially dice making, die cutting, custom plastic and wood components, doesn't meaningfully exist here yet. I've gotten quotes. I've talked to factories. Even when the willingness is there, the equipment, labor, and timelines simply aren't. And they're like, we're not the only company facing this situation. Ian Publishing, is part of Ian World, where this article is at. Here's a good example talking about the Kickstarters. It says, we at Ian Publishing have 4 Kickstarters, which have been paid for, including shipping by the customer already. 2 of those involved boxes and components, which meant they were manufactured in China. The other 2 are printed in the EU. All 4 inventory shipments will arrive in the U.S. after the tariffs come in. We haven't yet worked out exactly what that means, but it won't be pleasant. So a lot of this is uncertainty. See, when you're in business, you don't like uncertainty. You want as much certainty as possible. You want to be as risk averse as possible. And this coming along puts a lot of uncertainty. How long are these tariffs going to last? What do we do? How do we handle the tariffs? Are the tariffs going to go up even more? That kind of thing. So they're really struggling. Chaosium said, first, we will certainly need to raise the price of our books and board games. I think that's the only fair thing here. I mean, you can't ask people to absorb that. Companies can only absorb so much of that. He says, we simply cannot afford to absorb the cost of these additional tariffs. It says it may result in delays. They're looking around for other options, but in a lot of cases, the options just aren't there. At least not, in the United States. And if you go to another country, the United States is putting tariffs on more countries than just China. Cobalt Press says the short and sweet reality is that each hardcover printed outside the U.S. will cost from 20% to 50% more to produce. Like a lot of TTRPG companies, we simply can't afford that tax hike and stay in business. And again, there's we can't just suddenly, quote unquote, move these projects to the U.S. Now, I'm not sure. Now, the Arcane Library that produces Shadow Dark, they said the current tariffs, severe though they are not going to impact pricing or deliverability of. And they're talking about a game called a campaign maybe called the Western Reaches. We plan for this in our margins and can safely absorb the costs. I don't know how they did that, other than they had a ridiculously huge profit margin, or maybe they somehow used their crystal ball to see the tariffs were coming. I don't know. I don't know how you plan for that. And there's other companies, Evil Baby Entertainment, Stonemeyer Games, Coyote and Crow. So it's there's words like devastating, dire. So it's a big deal. And ultimately, if things don't change, either some products are going to get canceled and delayed, and the ones that do make it to you are probably going to cost more. That's the long and the short of it. And some companies are going to go out of business, and some already have, from what I understand. So on the flip side, interestingly enough, Wizards of the Coast says that China tariffs will have minimal impact on D&D. I don't understand how that could be. I mean, I get that Hasbro, a company like Hasbro, can probably absorb and roll with it longer, but to say that it doesn't, it can't affect them at all, I don't understand. Now they do say, I'll give you the whole thing. They're saying, this is Wizards of the Coast. This is also an article from Ian World. I'll put in the show notes. It says official Dungeons & Dragons products should largely be unaffected by the ongoing U.S.-China trade war. During today's Hasbro earnings call, and this is from Thursday, so that would be, I guess, yesterday. I'm recording this on a Friday evening. It said the only Wizards of the Coast products manufactured and shipped from China are the D&D box sets. While this means that the upcoming Heroes of the Borderlands starter set could have a higher price than usual, it does confirm that Dungeons & Dragons will be largely unimpacted by the ongoing trade war. And here's it says, due to the large print runs, Wizards usually taps domestic or continental printers for its various D&D products. English language D&D books all have printed in the USA in the credits page, according to this article. So that's interesting, because a lot of people say, well, we just don't have the capacity in the United States. But then Wizards are saying, well, we use the United States or other continental printers. But maybe they are printing on such a high level that they can get in with manufacturers that smaller publishers can't. I'm not sure. That's completely me speculating, but they're claiming, now it could just be corporate, whatever. Hey, don't worry, everything's fine, la la la. So that, because they just want to project a positive public face. I don't know, but that's what they claim anyway. Is that they are not going to be affected. Now, one final company I want to touch on here, and it just so happens, in 2022, about 3 years ago, I had an interview with Steve Chenault of Troll Lord Games. And one of the things he talked about was his business model and how they do everything in the United States as much as possible so that they're not affected by this kind of thing. They're like, hey, we weren't affected by COVID. We can't be affected by things affecting stuff coming in from China. So they said, I've been to their offices, and they literally have a commercial grade printer where they print a lot of their own stuff. And then when they can't print their own stuff, they find US based printers to do it. And they do that, one, but, to support US businesses, but two, so that they are as insulated as possible from the vagaries of the global economy. And it's a great, I'll link it in the show notes. It's the Wit and Wisdom of Troll Lord Games. It's from February 2022. And at the time I was impressed with their approach, and I'm even more impressed now, because we were talking about how they didn't get kicked in the butt by COVID like a lot of companies did. And now I've seen them talking, with all the stuff going on with China, they're largely insulated, and they're one of the larger, smaller publishers, if that makes sense, in the TTRPG space. They've been around for a while. They were one of the first to jump into what is considered the OSR, and they've done well for themselves. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, I do feel for the companies and the business owners and the employees that are impacted by this. However, people have been trying to not raise the alarm, but point out the dangers of relying on China as the world's manufacturer. It makes us dependent on them. It makes our whole business model for much of the business in the Western world dependent on China. So, the tariff thing could, nobody says that they had to impose these tariffs, but imagine like a war breaking out, or a global, or like a countrywide, some sort of disaster, some other thing coming along, or maybe a pandemic that was just in China, something coming along to affect China. It would, in some ways, it would be worse because you couldn't even get the products out, regardless of how high the tariff was on it. So when you're in business, you have to balance these things out. And if you could say, hey, I'm going to get the absolute lowest price possible on getting my stuff manufactured to increase my profit margin. But when you put all your eggs in one basket, like most people have put their manufacturing into China, you're susceptible to this sort of thing. So I do feel bad. No one saw this coming. But at the same time, there are ways to project for this kind of risk and insulate the risk and minimize its impact on you. For example, Trollord Games. So I don't know what their profit margins are compared to others. And I'm sure, man, if I was starting a business and I wanted to make role-playing game books or a board game, everyone's saying, no, go with this manufacturer, go to China. We've done it. It works fine. It takes a little time for the stuff to get off the boat and to you. But other than that, they do a great job and the prices are low. Yeah, I see the attraction. But does anyone ever ask themselves, you got to depend on another country. You got to put that on a boat. That boat could sink, or there could be a war or whatever, or tariffs could go up, there are risks here. And there is no such thing as a risk-free guarantee in life. So while I hope the tariff war ends soon, and I hope that these publishers can stay open, a lot of whom I know personally, and I feel for them. But at the same time, maybe this will be a wake-up call that, we need to be more diverse in how we manufacture. And the global economy in one ways is very strong. Hey, I do this with this country and that, and I manufacture here and da-da-da. But we're also susceptible and vulnerable in ways we wouldn't be if we weren't taking advantage of China being the world's manufacturer. So ultimately, I hope this resolves soon. I hope these small businesses stay in business. I hope they keep producing games. But I also hope maybe this will be a tough lesson learned moving forward, and maybe some manufacturing will spin up in the United States, and we won't be as reliant on China as we are right now. And there's manufacturing going on in other parts of the world too. I don't want to say that there isn't, but the vast majority is in China. So again, I hope everybody weathers the storm. And I understand if there's anger at why this is happening. But perhaps it can be a bitter pill to swallow that will strengthen the business practices all around of, being aware that that's a vulnerability, and that, we need to realize that can rise up and bite us in the butt on unexpectedly and on occasion. But again, ultimately, I hope these companies survive, and that it ends sooner rather than later. So best wishes for you all. All right, bringing us to the home stretch and wrapping us up. I want to take a moment and say goodbye to somebody who I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to before they left us. A friend of the show, Tony Dutra, who was on at least 3 different episodes. I'll link them in the show notes. Was also a buddy of mine I went to conventions with and got to know through the RPG hobby. Anyway, Tony's gone. And Tony was a true original. He taught me GURPS, and I came to appreciate GURPS. He was a rep. I don't know if they call him Men in Black or agent or whatever for Steve Jackson Games for a long time. He loved role playing, especially like old school role playing in GURPS. He had very strong opinions on the role of the game master. He was in a punk band back in California back in the day. Ended up in Western Arkansas in the last few years of his life. A true original. I really enjoyed Tony and all my times hanging out with him and talking with him. One of my best memories is we were looking through Grimtooth's traps and just laughing so hard I thought we were going to pass out. Tony was a philosopher. He went deep on his philosophy. He had strong beliefs in how the world worked and how it was supposed to work. And I didn't always agree with him. But I always loved listening to him because he knew what he believed and he knew why, and he could go deep on Robotech or Macross as it was in the original and talk about the difference between the philosophy of Macross in the original and what it became in Robotech. And I mean, he could take it deep. It was like college class level deep. So he was just. Tony was just Tony, and I don't know what happened. I just heard that he passed, but evidently he passed at his home, and I don't have all the details, and I guess I don't need to know the details. But Tony, you were an original. You genuinely loved role-playing games. You were one of the best game masters. Your GURPS games were so good and so well researched and so well planned. Some of the best gaming I've ever done. Just really impressive. I'll miss you. And I wish I had spent some more time with you before the end. I was just thinking to myself, I haven't talked to Tony in a while. And somebody reached out to me and letting me know because they had heard him on the show or maybe our GURP. We did this ridiculously deep GURPS character creation YouTube video. And also an example of play. And maybe they knew that I had a connection with Tony because of that. But anyway, Tony, you're a great guy. I'm glad that I knew you, and I'm sorry to hear that you're gone. Normally at this point, I end the show with a bad joke or bad jokes. And I call it bad joke of the week, even though the show isn't weekly anymore. It's just, I don't know, fun to call it that. But in honor of Tony, I think we'll just leave it here. Thanks so much for listening, for pressing play. Appreciate the time you have. Enjoy your geeky things. Just enjoy what you enjoy. Take a page from Tony and enjoy what you enjoy. And be an original. Be who you are. Don't let people yuck your yum. Just enjoy what you enjoy. Enjoy life. We literally don't know from day to day what's going to happen. So take care of business. But enjoy life. Thanks again for pressing play. We'll catch you next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk. Thanks so much for listening to Shane Plays Geek Talk. I certainly hope you enjoyed this journey into the things we love. For your convenience, show notes with helpful links for each episode can always be found at shaneplays.com. You can catch the podcast in several places, including on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, Verbal, YouTube, and more. If you like what you hear and would like to support Shane Plays Geek Talk, you can do so for as little as $1 per episode on Patreon at patreon.com/ShanePlays. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Stay geeky, my friends.